Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Tonight's episode is one you don't want to miss, because I'm about to share 5 true cornfield horror stories that will make you think twice before stepping into the fields after dark. Before we begin, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. It really helps YouTube show you more stories like this. Now let's begin. I didn't used to believe in shortcuts. Where I'm from, you miss one turn and the county just swallows you for a little while. No big drama, just an hour's worth of wrong sky. But gas got expensive, my second shift ran later, and the road by Jennings Creek started doing that thing where deer wait until your headlights are the only things alive before stepping out like they own your heartbeat. So I cut across the old Haverly corn. It wasn't posted. Haverly died last winter and his nephew never came back to harvest, so the field turned wild. Tall, brittle stalks with yellow tassels that rattled even when the air was dead. There's a tractor path that skims the edge and then cuts a diagonal toward the service road behind my rental. 2 nights of using it knocked 20 minutes off my drive. 3rd night made it a habit. 5th night made it a ritual. When you break a rule consistently enough, it stops feeling like a rule. I told myself the field was a victimless crime. The stalks were already dry. Raccoons had made confetti of the lower ears. The path was there. The stars were out. And the world was quiet in that very wide way where your own steps sound like they belong to someone else. About 3 seconds behind you. The first time I noticed the extra row, I wouldn't have called it that, not yet. I just felt a small wrongness in the way my phone's flashlight landed on the leaves. The light didn't stop at the stalks like it should. It sank a little, like the shadows were slightly heavier right of center. I paused, lifted the beam higher. The corn is planted in long straight lines. You can see down each one like a hallway. Every row ended at the fence line straight as a ruler, except one. The angle to my right didn't resolve. It kept going. I adjusted, took a few steps left to get the light straightened out. The corridor of stalks shifted with me, as if it were politely staying aligned. It's a trick of depth, I thought. The brain does that sometimes. You stare into stripes and your focus starts drifting. I lowered the light and kept walking. The path bends near a broken irrigation arm. You step over a cracked pipe and the ground fattens for a little stretch, soft from some old leak. My boots sank. 2 steps later, the ground went flat again. Somewhere behind me, a chorus of dry leaves lifted and fell like a slow breath. That breath isn't wind, I thought, because my skin didn't register any movement. It was the corn itself settling, or something moving through it very far away. I got home, locked the deadbolt, and replayed that shifting corridor in my head while microwaving yesterday's coffee. The image of it stuck like a popcorn kernel under the gum line of my thoughts. Too small to be a real problem, too irritating to ignore. I slept fine. On night 8, I angled my phone so I could film the path. Not for the internet, just for my own sanity. As I panned, each row clicked into place, bright and dark like piano keys. The extra row showed itself again, dead center of my frame, a slot that didn't align with the planting pattern. It was a fraction off, like when a drawer looks shut from the couch and then you stand up and notice it's out by a millimeter. I stepped forward and the corridor deepened. My light couldn't find the back of it. The rest of the field was shallow with reflected dust. That row drank the light. I told myself the same thing I tell myself about every creeping feeling. If you act normal, the world stays normal. So I did. I walked on. Something small tapped my shoulder and fell by my boot. Half an ear of corn, stripped smooth as if chewed down to ivory by a mouth that never had to swallow. By night 10, I knew where the wrong row would appear. I told myself that anticipating it would make it harmless. But expectation is a spotlight. It sharpens the thing you hope to dull. The row greeted me. Same polite alignment, same thirsty darkness. I lifted my light into it long enough to see the tassels stir without breeze, to hear very faintly the hush of 2 hands rubbing together inside the leaves. I kept walking, counting my steps, refusing to let my stride break. The stalks on both sides brushed my elbows like familiar strangers. Somewhere behind me, my own footsteps started to lag again. Like a second me was trying to keep my rhythm and couldn't quite. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I told myself that the path ends at the fence line because it always has. Only, when I reached it, the fence wasn't there, just corn and corn, and that one extra corridor that had somehow moved to stand in front of me, deep and patient, as if waiting for me to finally admit that I saw it. I shut off the light, tasted the dark like cloth, and took one step backward. The fence reappeared when the world felt me choose the old rule again. I climbed it with shaking hands and told myself that I'd be taking the paved road tomorrow. On the walk home along the service road, a moth, big as a fist, kept riding the air by my ear. I swatted at it and missed. It didn't feel like an insect. It felt like breath. I took the road the next night, then 2 nights after that I didn't. There is a kind of gravity to shortcuts. They pull harder the more you deny them. And some rows aren't planted. They arrive. The field finds you first in small ways. Dust where there should be dew, a smell like pennies in your throat. The old irrigation arm groaning once when you're still 100 yards off. I learned those tells without deciding to. The way you learn the sound your refrigerator makes before it dies. On the 12th night, I brought a better light. Not a phone beam, a heavy flashlight that could tattoo the tree line in white. I told myself this wasn't obsession. It was proof. Proof that the row was a trick of angle, a pothole in the eye. Proof that when I gave it hard light it would flatten, apologize, and go back to being corn. It did not. Bright as I poured the beam. The corridor took it the way the intake of a pipe takes water, a clean swallow. The leaves on both sides stayed detailed. I could count the veins. But the column ahead refused detail. It held nothing. It wasn't black, it was unrendered. The kind of space you get in your head before a memory loads. I said no out loud. Then I said it again like the second one might show spine. Above me the tassels whispered. A small gust started from nowhere and moved toward me through the leaves in a perfect straight line. The same way you can see rain coming across a lake. The wind stopped at my chest, as if the field had exhaled and was waiting for me to reply. I told myself to keep walking, so I did. But I didn't choose the path this time. The path chose my foot. There's a very specific sound a boot makes when it leaves gravel and steps onto bare, compacted dirt. The field knows that sound. I heard it and looked down and realized the tractor ruts had shifted under me, a subtle curve that shouldn't have been there. The wrong row had snuck sideways until it became forward, until it became the only corridor offering progress. I stood in the mouth of it, breath shallow, light jittering. From the darkness ahead I heard something small. Not a creature, not a bird. A sound from a human mouth that isn't speech. The kind of sound you make when someone you love says your name while you're sleeping. And a part of you answers before the rest of you wakes. It was that sound cut in half. It came again, shaped like the first syllable of my name, rolled small and careful like a test. I lowered the light. The corridor leaned closer. Not the stalks, not physically, but in the way you lean a question. When you get really scared, your brain starts bartering with objects the same way you barter with God. I told the row that I would take one step in, just one, then I would leave. I did. The air changed temperature. Not colder exactly, but thinner, as if the space in front of me had fewer molecules. The sound of insects that I'd been unconsciously registering turned off, like a bar's jukebox cut by a breaker. The leaves on either side lost their high, dry rattle and took on a softer note. Cloth across teeth. I lifted my beam. Something miles down the corridor flashed and was gone. A coin of light. It didn't blink the way reflecting eyes blink. It winked like a handheld mirror catching a stray star. I turned the light off and back on to force my pupils to reset. Far away. How far is a word that stops working the longer you say it? Far away the light came again. 2 coins this time. 3. I realized then what I was looking at. The tiny squares of broken glass that line the edges of some old tractor mirrors. Only there was no tractor. Just a low, steady hum. Not mechanical, but mouth-made, soprano thin and patient. I left the corridor with 2 steps that felt like running but weren't. I made myself do something normal. I picked a broken ear from the soil, snapped it in half to check for pests. The kernels inside were dry, perfect, and underneath them, where the silk should be, a thread of red string peeked out. Twine, like from the kind used to tag grain sacks. I pulled it free. It kept coming. 8 inches, a foot. The end of it was tied in the small, clumsy knot I used to make as a kid, when I pretended to fish in ditches with my cousin Aaron. My thumb knew that knot. The place on my thumbnail where the edge indents when you cinch it. I hadn't made that knot in 20 years. I dropped the ear like it was live and stepped back onto the tractor path. My light shook. I aimed it at the fence line there, a promise. I walked toward it without breaking stride, refusing to blink, refusing to adjust the beam. And just when I reached the last dozen yards, the fence politely wasn't there again. Something about the politeness of that absence enraged me more than fear did. The field didn't grab. It didn't threaten. It outmannered me. It removed a fact and waited to see if I'd notice. I noticed. "I don't want this," I said, and I meant the sentence in 6 directions. I meant the field. I meant the short drive. I meant the exhaustion that had made me choose it. I meant the shape of my life that had pressed me to the edges of everything I loved until the edges were all I walked. The hum from the corridor softened. Stalks should not soften. They are either quiet or they are not. But the sound changed pressure, like a hand loosening its grip without leaving your shoulder. Then the voice, the half-made one, tried again. It got the first letter of my name correct this time. It shaped the second like a memory of teeth. I closed my eyes, turned my back to the row that wasn't there, and walked blind for 3 steps. The way home isn't a direction so much as a refusal. Gravel found my boots. The fence materialized. The night, in gratitude, added insect sound back a teaspoon at a time. At my door, I put the red twine on the countertop and stared at it like evidence. I told myself very clearly, tomorrow you drive the long way. Tomorrow came. And I did. And the day after that, I didn't. Because shortcuts are a religion. They promise a smaller suffering now to avoid a larger sacrifice later. I kept promising. The field kept accepting. Until the night the corridor said my name correctly, in my mother's exact voice. It wasn't the voice that broke me. It was the sentence that followed because it was ordinary. Dinner's getting cold. That's what the corridor said in my mother's easy end-of-day tiredness, the one that carried forgiveness for being late, and a question about whether I'd made space for anything but work. My mother has been gone 11 years. The last words she said to me were, "Don't stay too late on a day I stayed too late." I heard her voice and stepped forward before I could remind my legs what was true. The corridor accepted me. Unrendered space became a kind of almost place. The outline of stalks without their veins. The ghost of soil without its grit. I walked carefully, beam low, as if I could keep the world real by respecting it. The hum came again, closer, held on the soft sound at the back of the tongue that begins a name. It said, and that was wrong because my name doesn't start with that sound. Then it tried again and got it right, and I felt something in the air smile. "I'm not staying," I said. The corridor exhaled. Not wind, approval. The tassels brushed each other in slow applause. A shape appeared far ahead, more felt than seen. Something the height of a man and the thickness of 12 stalks. Standing very still with its head turned toward me, but without any of a head's features, just the attention of one. When it spoke again, the voice slid an inch sideways, borrowed from other people I loved, other people who had been patient with my lateness. My grandfather's throat clearing before a story. Aaron's laugh flattened into a word. Then, groping for a center, the corridor landed on a voice that could only have been mine. Not exactly. More like the version of my voice I hear when I talk into a fan. It said my name with the private weight I give it inside my skull. It said, "I know the way." I raised the beam to the polite height you use when you don't want to offend a stranger by shining it in their face. The light slid off the shape. It wasn't even that the light failed, it deferred. Like it recognized rank. My hand trembled. The shape didn't move, not for a long time. And then it did something small. It lifted one hand's worth of leaves and showed me. Nestled there like a find in a boy's palm, a strip of red twine tied with my childhood knot. "I don't want this," I repeated. But I did. The admission reached me like thirst. I wanted the corridor to finish the sentence it had started when it first mispronounced my name. I wanted the field to take my lateness and turn it into a place where lateness made sense. I wanted to stop choosing between the long way that took care of me and the short way that punished all the old hungry parts until they slept. The field is a ledger, I realized. Not haunted in the movie sense. Accounted. Every time I took a minute from the big road and fed it to the small one, the field wrote it down. Rows are debts. This corridor was my credit line extended to infinity. A rustle to my left. Then a mirror rustled to my right, exactly out of phase, like two instruments tuning. I decided to do the only true thing left to do. I sat down. Cross-legged, like a kid playing school in the dirt. The shape paused as if I'd said something brilliant in a language that wasn't words. "You can say my name," I told whatever it was. "But you can't give it back to me." The shape tilted. The corridor hummed. The red twine lifted higher. For a second, just 1 second, the light caught something within the shape like an edge. Metal, and winked. I saw my face in that coin. Not a reflection, a possibility. I looked tired. I looked like somebody who had learned the map by shaving off corners until the corners became roads of their own. "Okay," I said. "Here's my trade. You can keep the minutes I stole. All of them. But I'm keeping the road." I stood. I didn't turn. I walked backward, 6 careful steps, the way you retreat from a dog that isn't sure about you. The corridor stayed where it was. The way a threshold stays where it is even when your foot is past it. The air thickened back into ordinary. Grain came back into the leaves. Insects threaded their little metal song back through the seams. My beam found the fence like it always had. The path lowered as if embarrassed to have been high for so long. I climbed the fence like a person late for dinner, not like a person leaving a sacred place. On the other side, I set my flashlight on the ground, took the red twine in both hands and pulled. It didn't fight me. It just kept coming, soft, steady, until the end slid free with that childhood knot kissing my thumbnail. I looped it around the fence post and tied it in my grown-up knot, the one my hands learned working in warehouses and hauling boxes and doing all the work of small towns that don't show up on resumes. I left it there. On the service road, I walked the long way home. When I reached my door, I didn't check the lock first. I checked the clock. I wasn't late. The math didn't make sense, but that's the thing about ledgers. If you give something back, sometimes an old debt forgives itself. I slept and dreamed of rows, each one a hallway in a house made of harvest. In the morning, my boots were still dirty from where I'd sat in the corridor. The red twine was not on my counter. Out my window over the top of the shrubs, I could see the fence at the edge of Haverley's field. A dove had claimed the post. The scrap of twine fluttered below it like a prayer someone else had tied. I haven't cut across the corn since, but listen. This part matters. The world is honest when you let it be. But habits are engineers. They find paths. A week after I left the twine, I took the interstate like a good man. Like a man who learned something. The drive was clean. I got off at my exit. My hands turned the wheel. And my GPS, the one that is never updated without me, drew my blue line onto a street that didn't exist last week. A perfect diagonal, shaving a minute and a half off my time. It wasn't a road. It was a hint. It ended on the map at the edge of Haverley's field. A tiny pale lane that tapered into nothing, labeled with a name I didn't recognize, row 0. I zoomed in until the pixels gave up. The line stayed. That night when I lay down, the shadow along my bedroom wall was a fraction darker than it should have been. Just enough to suggest a hallway where the drywall was flat. Not a haunting. An invitation. I keep the lights off now when I pass that corner. I keep my eyes forward. I tell myself this is what grown men do when they're done paying interest on shortcuts. And some nights, just some, I hear the tassels applaud behind my teeth. If you cut across any field long enough, it starts cutting back across you. Just know which side of the fence you'd like your name to be on when the rows arrive. Awesome. Got it. I'll deliver each part separately and wait for your approval before moving on. The Haskins place sits just past the bend where County Road 9 loses its paint, and the ditches turn to cattail and beer cans. I used to drive by that stretch with my window cracked because the corn there has a smell you can't fake. Sweet rot and green breath, like the field itself is quietly fermenting. After Mr. Haskins passed, his daughter leased the acres to a man nobody sees in daylight, and the rows grew taller than I remember, lean, crowded, whispering in a voice that makes you look back at your rearview mirror even when nothing's behind you. The scarecrow didn't start strange. It was just there one July morning, staked on the south edge where the crows like to test boundaries. Old flannel shirt, a pair of muddy jeans stuffed with straw, work gloves and a burlap sack for a head with 2 button eyes and a slit where a mouth would be if mouth mattered. I don't know who dressed it. The shirt was the exact sun-faded red my father wore the summer he taught me how to replace brake pads in the gravel driveway. Sleeves rolled. I told myself it was a common color. I told myself lots of scarecrows get their clothes from laundry piles that outlive their owners. At first it worked like it should. Birds kept their distance. The wind practiced its small talk through the sleeves. Sometimes the figure leaned left or right depending on the day's mood. The slit in the burlap stayed a slit. It was a prop, a signal, nothing more. On a Tuesday that didn't mean anything, I slowed the truck because the scarecrow looked off. Not different exactly, just aimed. It had that posture people get when they're listening in a crowd. I cracked the window and heard corn rubbing on corn with that chalky rasp that makes your tongue want water. And underneath that, quieter, the sound a mouth makes when it readies a word. Not a voice, not yet. Just the tongue finding home behind the teeth. I told myself I was tired. I told myself the road has noises that come and go. A far-off tractor pulling metal, a dog dragging a chain, tires like waves on chip seal. But that night, right as I fell toward sleep, the rasp returned in my head. Not as sound, but as texture. The dark of my room had a grain to it. I lay there, pupils wide, tasting burlap in the back of my throat like I'd been chewing a sax string. Next morning, the scarecrow faced the road. I don't mean it had turned. I mean the whole arrangement, the crossbar shoulders, the stuffed jeans, the slouch of the neck, had settled into an attention that only people and hunters know. Its button eyes weren't aligned. One was higher, which gave it a permanent squint, like it had a thought about me and was debating whether to share. I parked on the shoulder and told myself I was being neighborly. I crossed the ditch, stepped over milkweed and thistle, and stood a careful 2 yards away. Up close, the scarecrow smelled like wheat dust and a wet basement. The burlap head was tied with twine at the throat, and whoever tied it had used that quick slip knot you learn when you work with your hands long enough to value untying as much as tying. The mouth slit had been cut jagged with a knife that tugged instead of slicing clean. I could see straw pressing against the inside like yellow teeth. "Morning," I said, because I'm the kind of man who speaks to objects when I'm not sure what's listening. I waited for wind to cover my embarrassment. Wind didn't come. The corn around us held its breath. A crow landed on the fence post across the ditch and cocked its head like it was waiting for the punchline. That was when I realized what was wrong. There were no other scarecrows in sight. Haskins used to put 3, one per long side and one at the corner that catches the county boys when they cut like they own the gravel. Now there was just this one, too close to the road, where it could watch the hours. I lifted a glove to adjust the flannel collar. I don't know why, maybe to prove it was clothes and not skin, and the scarecrow shifted under my touch. Not much, an inch of give, but it moved against me like a shoulder politely reclaiming its space. The burlap head turned a fraction. The button eyes didn't, because buttons don't. Still, I felt the gaze relocate. "Okay," I said, and backed off like you do when a dog isn't sure. The crow made a small sound like a cough and flapped away, offended by the lack of drama. I got in my truck and told myself that would be the story. The day I felt silly in a field. That night, my phone fell off the nightstand. It didn't jump. I knocked it when I turned. The screen came alive in the dark, and for a second the bright rectangle lit my ceiling in the shape of a window that wasn't there. In that wash of light, a whisper threaded itself through the room, as gentle and unmistakable as my name said by someone at the foot of the bed. Not loud. Not begging, just sure. One syllable, stretched. The way my grandmother used to sing it when I slept at her house and pretended to still be dreaming so I could be carried to the kitchen table. I sat up too fast and the dark swam.
"Hello?"
I said like a fool because I didn't want to say "who's there?" and make the night choose an answer. Silence. Then the smallest suggestion of burlap against teeth. I could hear it, I swear I could. The rough inside of the sack dragged by breath. I didn't sleep. The body can plan a tired day. What it cannot plan is the exact shape of fear sitting in your lungs like a folded tool you don't know how to use. At sunrise, I drove back to the Haskins place. I told myself I was going to laugh at daylight. The scarecrow stood where it stood, straw-gloved hands at its sides, shirt hanging with the kind of dignity a second-hand thing earns. The mouth slit looked a hair wider. Maybe wind had worried it open. Maybe a raccoon had tested the edges. I walked up without crossing the ditch this time. Just stood on the shoulder with the engine ticking cool behind me. "Did you say my name last night?" I asked. The question felt like throwing a rope over water to see if it hit something. The field answered in field ways. A grasshopper snapped and leapt. The corn hissed a little as morning warmed it. A truck down the road popped gravel like static. Then, not from the scarecrow exactly, not from the road or the row, but from the thin seam of air at the mouth of the burlap, something shaped a consonant. It missed, the wrong edge of sound. It tried again, patient as practice. I didn't move. I let the morning decide how much of me it wanted. A breeze came at last and toyed with the sleeves. And for a second the right glove lifted and tilted, palm up, like a hand beginning a greeting before it remembers itself. I went home by a longer route that added 15 minutes and a sermon. All day at work, the memory of the burlap's breath kept finding the back of my tongue. People said my name, and each time they did, I heard the scarecrow's attempt buried under theirs like a second track not quite aligned. At dusk, I found myself back at the bend, window down despite the mosquitoes. I didn't plan to stop. But a thing happens sometimes when you pass a place where something started. The road leans you a little, and your foot corrects in a way that looks like choice. I pulled onto the shoulder and killed the engine. I could smell the field. The scarecrow stood in silhouette, a dark grammar mark at the edge of all that whispering. "Say it," I told whatever lived in the seam. "If you're going to say it, say it." The corn quieted like a congregation. The wind chose a pocket and held it. From the slit, breath gathered. My name came out in 2 pieces. Careful, each syllable held like a new coin someone isn't sure is real. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I didn't run. I didn't cross the ditch either. I rolled the window up with a hand that shook and watched the scarecrow through glass, like distance could be manufactured by a crank. The button eyes didn't move. The whole head tilted the smallest degree, just enough to learn me, and I understood with a clarity I wish I didn't have. It wasn't practicing speech, it was practicing me. By Thursday night, the sound had shape. You know how a name can wear someone's breath? How your mother says it's soft, your boss says it's sharp, your friend says it lazy? The scarecrow had started shaping mine like an echo of all 3 at once. I could hear it in the rhythm of the wind outside my trailer. Every time a gust touched the cornfield down the hill, my porch light flickered. Not random, not storm flicker, but steady. As if the power was breathing with the rouse. I didn't tell anyone. Try explaining to a coworker that a stuffed man in an empty field has started memorizing your vowels. By Friday, the whole field had changed. Driving by in daylight, I noticed the scarecrow's flannel was cleaner than it should have been, like rain had washed it. But it hadn't rained all week. The buttons gleamed, catching sunlight in tiny pulses, the way a cat's eyes do when they're watching movement. Someone had also tied a fresh length of twine around its wrists, binding the gloves to the crossbeam. Only the knot was mine. That double wrap, quick pull knot I've tied since childhood. That's when I stopped pretending this was wind or imagination. I parked again, heart steady but mouth dry. When I stepped to the ditch, the air felt warm. Not sunlight warm, breath warm, like something exhaling behind the rows. Corn doesn't hold heat like that. Not at dusk, I took my phone out to record. I panned across the scarecrow, the shirt, the sack head, the mouth slit. Nothing moved. But on playback, the video had sound. A dragging whisper, soft as burlap sliding across itself, repeating my name 3 times. The last one ended with a small crack, like a jaw unhinging. I deleted the video instantly. Deleting it didn't help. That sound stayed. Not in my ears and in my chest. Like something living just behind the ribs, learning how to pronounce the shape of my heartbeat. That night I dreamed of the Haskins field. But it wasn't dead summer anymore. It was harvest and the air was cold. Rows of corn leaned inwards like bowed heads, and at the center, under a white harvest moon, the scarecrow stood with both hands down, fingers spread. Not straw fingers anymore, real ones. They were mine. I woke up gasping. My hands were clean, but under the nails was something dry and golden. Bits of husk. I hadn't eaten corn in weeks. The next morning, I took the long way to work again. Past the bend, eyes straight ahead. But somehow in my mirror, the scarecrow was closer to the road. It shouldn't be possible. It was staked deep into the soil. Yet the shoulder looked disturbed, as if something had dragged a wooden post forward inch by inch. The dirt looked shoveled, not plowed. That evening I drove back. Not to confront it, just to see. The scarecrow was now at the ditch, arms still stretched, the slit wider, edges frayed. Something dark lined the inside of the burlap. Not blood, not paint. Darker, like shadow burned into fabric. The flannel was torn open at the chest, revealing straw matted with small white feathers. Crows never do that. They don't stuff their own molted feathers back where they came from. I stood there, headlights on low beam, door open, hand on the frame. Then it whispered again. Not through air, through static. My truck's radio turned itself on dead channel, and out of that white hiss came the soft drag of a breath finding a word. It said my name, perfect this time. And then in my voice it said, "Turn around." I froze. The sound didn't come from the scarecrow's direction. It came from behind me, from inside the cab. I turned slowly. Empty seat. Radio hissing. Rear window fogged from inside even though the AC was on. And through that thin white mist, a shape leaned forward, head-shaped, burlap-textured, button-eyed, pressed right against the glass for half a heartbeat before the fog cleared and nothing was there. I drove home in silence. Lights off, the way people drive when they don't want the night to recognize them. When I reached my porch, my door was ajar. Inside, no break-in, nothing stolen. But on my kitchen chair lay that same piece of red twine that had bound the scarecrow's wrists, tied neatly into that same double-wrapped knot. It wasn't wet. It wasn't dirty. It smelled faintly of corn and breath. I didn't go to work the next morning. I sat at the table with that red twine coiled in front of me like a small sleeping animal. Every hour, the light through the kitchen window shifted, and the twine seemed to drink it, growing darker, wetter looking, as if absorbing time instead of shadow. By noon, I'd convinced myself to end it. Burn it, bury it, something final. But the field doesn't like endings, it likes circles. When I stepped onto the porch, I smelled smoke that wasn't mine. Out across the low hills, a thin column rose, too steady for a brush fire. too small for burning trash. The direction was exact, Haskins' south edge. I drove without deciding to. Gravel popped like knuckles under the tires. Halfway there, the air turned thick and yellow, the kind that coats your tongue with copper. By the time I reached the bend, the smoke had folded back into the field as if inhaled. The scarecrow was gone from its post. The crossbeam still stood, raw splinters bright where the rope had torn free. The corn nearest the ditch was flattened in a narrow trail leading inward, like something had walked itself home. I left the truck running and followed. Every few steps the rows closed behind me, stitching the path shut. The deeper I went, the warmer it became, until sweat blurred my eyes and the air carried that whispering rasp of burlap over teeth. Then I saw it. The scarecrow stood 20 yards ahead, not hung, not slumped, standing. The flannel hung open, the chest filled with beating dark that moved like breath under fabric. The head tilted, those button eyes catching slivers of sunlight through the stalks. It spoke first, my name. Perfect again. Then, you left the door open. I wanted to deny it, but the words froze in my mouth because, yes, I had. I remembered the latch still swinging when I drove off. You let me in, it said with my own voice this time. You said good morning. The field hummed, low and patient, as if agreeing. I took a step back. It took one forward, shoulders creaking. With every movement, bits of straw sloughed off and new ones pushed through the sleeves like veins rethreading themselves. The burlap mouth stretched, not a smile. More like a wound remembering how to close. I just wanted to keep the birds away, I said. Ridiculous words for a dying man, it nodded. The way people do when they've already decided the ending. Then stay, it whispered. Keep them away. Something seized my calves, roots maybe, or twine rising from the dirt, and I felt the ground opening around my boots, soft as breath. I yanked free, fell backward, clawed through broken husks until daylight slashed between stalks. When I looked up, it was closer, so close I could see the frayed edge of the sack and the faint outline of a mouth moving underneath it, human and wrong. I ran. The rows tore at my arms, the world narrowing to the sound of dry leaves screaming past my ears. Behind me, steps matched mine, heavy, uneven but real. The field kept trying to close, to rewrite itself around the thing chasing me. I broke through at the ditch and didn't stop until the road tilted downhill. When I turned back, nothing stood at the edge. Just corn, motionless, polite. Except the post. On it now hung my jacket, sleeves outstretched, the hood pulled tight around something roughly head-shaped. I left town that night. That was 2 years ago. I live 3 counties over now, in a place where wheat replaces corn and the air moves differently. But some nights when wind rattles the siding, I hear the slow rasp of burlap. Sometimes my porch light flickers in a rhythm that fits my name. And once, just once, I woke to find a smear of straw across my bedroom window screen, shaped like a hand mid-wave. They say the Haskins field was bulldozed last fall, turned into flat pasture. Good, but pastures grow things too. And I know that somewhere under that soil, there's a length of red twine waiting, not tied twice. Quick pull style, ready for the next voice that says good morning to the wrong kind of man. Because scarecrows don't keep birds away. They keep names, and once they learn yours, they never forget how to say it. I've lived in Kepler County my whole life. Out here, the cornfields roll farther than the horizon wants to admit, and the sky gets so big at night it feels like it's bending to listen. You learn 2 rules growing up rural. Don't follow lights into a field, and don't ask who they belong to. I'd broken both before I turned 30. It started the summer the irrigation pumps went dry. The whole county shimmered with dust. The rows of corn leaned in on themselves like old men at a bus stop. My brother and I ran a small farm off County Line Road. Barely kept the lights on, so when the neighbors started talking about the circles, we laughed it off. Said heat lightning, said kids with drones. But deep down we knew those kids couldn't draw perfect rings half a mile wide. The first time I saw them, I was sober. That part's important. It was a Thursday night in late August, clear, still no moon. I'd been up fixing the combine's fuel line when a white glow spilled through the slats in the barn wall. Not headlights, not a floodlight. It was colder, like refrigerator light spilling into dark. I stepped out, wiping my hands on a rag, and the whole field beyond the fence was lit by 5 perfect circles. Floating. Not on the ground. In the air. Each one was the size of a truck hood, hung maybe a foot above the corn, moving slow. Too deliberate to be wind. The light wasn't steady and it pulsed like it was breathing. I remember thinking, if it's man-made, it'll cast shadows. So I looked down. No shadows, just pale glow reflecting off the husks. And then, I heard it, that low hum. Not mechanical. It felt older. Like something big trying to remember how to speak after years of silence. I walked toward the fence, slow. The air between me and those lights felt thick, almost syrupy. Every step took effort, like walking through underwater air. When I reached the fence, my flashlight flickered and died. I hit it against my palm. Nothing. The circles drifted closer, their edges overlapping, 5 breaths sinking into one. The hum got louder. The corn began to lean, all of it, bowing toward the center as if something beneath the soil was inhaling. And then I saw footprints. Not in the dirt, in the light. Inside each circle, faint outlines formed, 2 feet side by side, pressed into pure white. That's when I ran. When I looked back, the lights had dimmed to half strength, like they'd noticed my attention was gone. The hum faded. But halfway up the gravel road, I glanced over my shoulder and saw something worse. A 6th light. It wasn't in the field. It was pacing me, hovering low along the ditch, maybe 20 feet away. I kept running. It kept perfect pace and smooth, effortless. I couldn't hear it. Couldn't smell anything. Just that glow matching my speed like a quiet companion. When I reached the gate, it stopped. Hung there, then it blinked out like someone flipped a switch. No fade, no trail, gone. By morning, I told myself it was electrical, swamp gas, drone lights, something. But the truth clawed through when I checked the field. There were no burned patches, no flattened rows, nothing. Except for those same 5 perfect circles, not glowing now, just a faint discoloration in the corn, like someone had bleached the plants overnight, and in the middle of one of them a single white feather. Not from a crow, not from any bird I know. It was translucent, fragile as frost. When sunlight hit it, it shimmered with colors that don't have names yet. I kept it in the glove box. That night, the lights came back, not 5 this time, 6, and this time, one hovered right outside my bedroom window. The second night arrived with the kind of quiet you notice only after it stops. All day the wind had worried the cottonwoods, and then at dusk the leaves just decided to hold their breath. Heat stayed in the walls. The house ticked like a cooling engine. I tried to make noise that felt human. TV on low, fork on plate, a phone call I didn't finish because the line kept coughing with a soft static that sounded like breath pressed through cloth. I checked the glove box twice. The feather still there, thin as a sliver of ice, catching porch light in a way that made color pretend to exist. By 10, I killed the lights and went to the bedroom. I left the window cracked. Habit, country. People sleep with a little air. That's when the first circle rose. It came up from the ditch across the lane as if the ground were a surface it could pass through without asking. One perfect ring, white as fridge light, lifted to window height and traveled the road's edge without stirring a leaf. The shade on my lamp caught its glow and turned the room the color of old paper. I held still. You get a sense for when movement is permission. The circle stopped outside my window, not on the glass. A foot back, hovering so close the moths on the screen went quiet as if they'd flown away into silence. The light brightened and dimmed, 3 slow pulses, like someone on the other side of heavy glass practicing how lungs work. Okay, I said, not out loud, just in my head, the way you talk to animals you don't want to spook. My name didn't feel like something I owned anymore. It felt like something the night could use. On the wall opposite the window, the ring threw a hard edge. No softness, no fade, like a stencil. The circle moved to the left. The circle on the wall slid to the right, perfect mirror. It moved up, then down, testing what my room did with geometry. Then it tried something I still can't describe without feeling foolish. It stepped. Not closer. Like a person steps. Healed into a shift in weight that wasn't weight. The ring didn't translate left or right much. It tilted. The top edge dipped forward, then back in a rhythm that matched the way humans lean when walking. The smallest bow to gravity we make with every pace. On the wall, that motion became an ellipse. Long, then round, then long again in time with steps not yet taken. I swung my legs to the floor and stood up slow. The circle held steady at window height. I lifted my right foot an inch, then lowered it to the rug. The circle pulsed once. I lifted my left foot. It pulsed again, not copying, counting. That's close enough, I said, because people say things to put borders on the air. The light dimmed to a patient white. I had the sense suddenly that if I turned the lamp on, it would be rude. I reached for my phone to film. The screen stayed black. Not dead, numb, black with that deep LCD glow that says your device is on and just not interested. It vibrated once in my palm anyway. A calendar reminder I hadn't set flashed for half a second. Irrigation around 12:03 a.m. Then cleared itself like a guilty thought. In the glass behind the ring, I saw myself. Or I thought I did. But the reflection didn't agree with me. The shape in the pane had my shoulders but stood a hair taller. It breathed a beat out of time with me, as if learning the rhythm and coming close. The hum started then. Felt first in my teeth. Low, almost friendly. A sound you could convince yourself was distant machinery if you needed to sleep. It came from everywhere at once. The ditch, the rows beyond, the space inside the ring. My chest cavity humming back in sympathy like an empty cupboard when a truck goes by. I backed into the hallway. Heart steady like it gets when something is too strange to be fear yet. The ring didn't follow. It just held at the window and brightened in small, careful increments until the moth bodies were paper dolls on the screen. I went to the kitchen for the heavy flashlight. When I clicked it on, the beam worked fine, strong, clean. I took 3 steps toward the bedroom and the light thinned, as if the air between me and the ring had been stretched like plastic wrap. I aimed anyway and met white with white. The beam didn't erase the circle or break it. It just folded, like it had entered a room already occupied by another kind of light and decided to be polite. Enough, I said, now out loud. Sometimes manners feel like authority. I dropped the beam to the floorboards. The ring dimmed half a notch, as if considering the word. That's when the rest of them arrived. 5 more circles rose in a gentle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from different points along the ditch and the field beyond. They traveled low, skimming the tops of the grass without bending it, and settled in a half-moon along my fence. Each hung exactly 18 inches above the ground. I measure that now because I measured it later. In the moment, it just looked like the height where knees begin. They didn't spread their light everywhere. Each one lit only its own circle, as if they had boundaries even light obeyed. Inside each disc, shapes wavered, not feet this time, not prints, gestures. A hand lifted and turned, palm, knuckle, palm. Fingers extended, curled, extended. In one, 2 outlines stood side by side like someone teaching someone else how to wave. I went outside. I know, the porch boards didn't creak. Another quiet I noticed only because I needed a reason not to go farther. The air on the steps was cooler than inside, but tasted like the inside of a refrigerator when you stand there too long at night. That sweet sterile chill of light and metal, pretending to be weather. From the top stair, I could see all 6 discs clearly. They weren't random on my fence line. They grouped themselves into a shape my brain wanted to call a word before it could read it. The center ring pulsed twice. The one to its right answered once. The far left pulsed 3 times like a stutter. I stared at the dirt below them, dry, undisturbed. No shadows from the rails. No marks where anything had brushed or pressed. Even the gnats moved through the light without leaving streaks. It was like the circles were mistakes the night hadn't erased yet. A sudden sound came from behind me. The fridge. Its motor kicked on and then stalled, like something had put a hand on its chest. The kitchen clock advanced all at once, 4 clicks a minute too fast, and then stayed there. Electricity is a very obedient animal until it gets new instructions. I stepped off the porch. The yard had that shallow depth night gives objects you think you know. My boots found dust. I kept my eyes on the ground, daring it to change. It didn't. I set my foot under the center circle, the hum climbed a note. The light above me grew a fraction brighter. On my face and hands, the glow felt like the cool side of a pillow. I lifted my right hand, palm up. The disc matched the gesture with a white outline on nothing. A hand made of light doing what mine did from a foot away. Just the edges. No bones. No lines. Like a child's tracing without the paper. I turned my wrist. It turned its rim. I closed my fingers. The outline closed slow, copying the idea of grip. "Who are you?" I asked. It's a dumb question and a fair one. The circles answered with a change in frequency. The hum pressed against my sternum until I could hear my own heartbeat sink to it, and then lag like a drummer learning a song. And then, all together, they stepped. The tilt, the lean, the not quite wait. 6 discs doing the same almost walk at once toward the road. They wanted me to follow. Every warning anyone ever taught me lined up like fence posts in my head. Don't follow lights into a field. Don't ask who they belong to. Don't make a bridge out of yourself for anything that doesn't need one. I followed. We crossed the lane. Gravel didn't crunch. The ditch grass didn't bend. The circles drifted over the far fence like soap bubbles refusing to acknowledge barbed wire. On the far side, the corn stood taller than me. The discs sank between rows until I couldn't see them from the lane. Just the top halves, 6 moons setting in a field that wasn't night yet. I swung one leg over the fence, then the other. The ground received my weight like it always had her. A little give, a little grit. The lights pulled deeper, pausing every dozen paces to let me see where they had not been. We reached the center flats, the spot where the soil always goes a shade darker in August, where Haverly used to say water remembered to sit. The discs fanned out into a wide ring, perfect as a surveyor's drawing. The hum dropped until it was almost below hearing, a pressure more than sound. Inside the circle, the light thinned. Not dimmed, thinned, stretched tight over air. Shapes appeared on its skin from below, rising like fish under ice. Toes, heels. The idea of feet side by side, pressing up from the underside of light as if testing what a step is. And yet when I looked at the dirt under that glow, nothing marked it. No flattened husks. No pressed dust. No print. I thought of the feather in my glove box. The way it had seemed both there and not. Something caught between being a thing and the thought of a thing. The center disc brightened suddenly and slid forward until it touched my chest without touching. The cold went through the shirt and found the place under the sternum where breath waits. I felt a pop in my ears like altitude. My eyes watered, and then all 6 went black at once. No fade, no afterimage. Just a darkness so clean the stars looked like they'd been polished. The hum continued for 2 more heartbeats and then stopped. The field was a field again. I stood in the middle of nothing, hands up like a man caught. The corn was as I'd left it. The ground was honest. The night had its normal size back. Behind me, from the direction of the house, a door closed. Not mine. I turned. At the edge of the rows, just inside the fence I'd climbed, a 7th circle had risen without light. No glow, no shimmer, only an absence. A hole cut in the dark, perfectly round, hovering 18 inches above the ground, moving toward me the way a step sounds when you don't see it yet. I didn't run, because from inside that black ring came the quietest imitation of a voice I recognized as my brother's. 4 counties away tonight, saying my name like he does when he wants me to come see something I won't believe. Come look. It breathed. And there, at the center of the circle in the dirt that held no marks, something small and pale began to rise. The seventh circle wasn't bright. It drank brightness. All around me the other six hung low, pale again as if the night had reversed a film reel. The hum rose through the soles of my boots, not loud, just certain. It vibrated bone. At the center of that black ring, the pale thing kept rising. At first it looked like mist caught in a jar, but it condensed into a shape. A shoulder, a head, then two arms folded wrong, jointed as if memory had been given a body but not instructions. Light leaked from its edges the way air leaks from a dying tire, steady, quiet, inevitable. It had no face, only the idea of one. The mouth was a bright slit, not open, not closed, waiting. When it turned toward me, the other circles reacted. Each blinked once, dim, bright, dim, like breathing in sequence. The air smelled of metal and rain that never happened. I said my brother's name because that was the voice that had called me here. The shape tilted its head, then answered, not as echo but with my own voice, "Come look." Exactly the same tone, same pause. Hearing yourself spoken back by something without lungs does something to your sense of ownership. Your body feels rented. It reached out an arm that lengthened as it moved, the hand not quite solid. Where its fingers ended, light thinned into threads, each thread searching. They didn't touch me. They drew near, and every hair on my arm stood upright, swaying toward them. I took half a step forward before realizing the dirt under the ring wasn't dirt anymore. It shimmered like water, ripples moving outward without disturbing a thing. And yet there were still no footprints, neither mine nor theirs. The ground rejected record. I crouched and touched the edge of that shimmer, cold but not temperature, cold like forgetting something important halfway through the thought. My fingertip vanished up to the nail, replaced by a faint blue outline mimicking it inside the circle. I pulled back, skin whole, but the blue image remained, suspended in the glow like a trapped breath. The figure leaned down and pressed its palm over that faint print. The outline of my finger dissolved, absorbed into its hand. Then it whispered again, quieter, inside my head rather than through air. "You left it open." My chest tightened. The barn door. I had left it unlatched last night when I fled. The same phrase the scarecrow had used years ago. The same guilt, different field. I turned to run, and the world rearranged itself politely to prevent that. The rows were gone. Corn replaced by emptiness folded into itself like curtains in windless air. Every direction showed the same faint horizon. Identical stars repeated, a mirror cube of night. The circles floated at precise intervals, forming a grid above invisible ground. Somewhere beyond hearing, something counted. Steady, mechanical, infinite. I called for my brother again, loud this time. The sound didn't travel. It fell out of my mouth and curved back, landing behind my teeth. The figure stopped moving. The black ring around it widened until it touched the toes of my boots. When its edges brushed my shadow, I felt weight leave me, like gravity had decided to skip a turn. My feet lifted half an inch, maybe less, but enough that the soil no longer answered my balance. That's when I understood the circles. They weren't footprints because they weren't on anything. They were rehearsal. Something was learning the concept of touching ground, and I was the lesson. I dropped to my knees, grabbed at the earth that wasn't there, and shouted, "Stop!" The word came out thick, stretched. The figure froze mid-reach as if waiting for correction. I pointed at my boots, at the dirt that refused to hold me, and forced out, "Like this." For a heartbeat, nothing. Then it imitated. The light bent inward. The shape's feet formed, toes pressing through glow to soil. And when they did, the hum broke. One sharp pop like vacuum releasing. Dust exploded upward around us, honest dust, heavy and brown. My boots slammed down onto real ground again. The thing tilted its head once more, curious. The black ring flickered, then fractured into 6 smaller rings that lifted away, dispersing like sparks sucked into sky. The figure shrank with them, threads of light peeling off its body until only the faint shimmer of a feather remained, spinning in place before drifting down to rest on the soil. No sound. No hum, just wind finally remembering itself. I picked up the feather. Same as before, translucent, impossible. Warm this time, not cold. When I closed my hand around it, it vanished, leaving dust and the smell of ozone. The field behind me was corn again. Rows, honest and uneven. The house lights burned yellow, steady. My watch read 12:03 a.m., the reminder the phone had shown me. 1 exact minute stolen. I walked back across the lane. My footprints stayed. I checked twice, that should have been the end, it isn't. Because now every night around that same time, my phone buzzes with that appointment, irrigation, arbor, 12:03 a.m. And when I ignore it, the screen goes white for exactly 6 seconds, a faint circle glowing in the center before fading. This morning, I found dust on the windowsill shaped like a bare footprint. No heel, no toe marks. Just a perfect circle where the weight should have been. I wiped it away. Tonight, the reminder went off again, earlier than usual, 12:02 a.m. Maybe that's how lessons work. Once something learns to step down, it keeps practicing. And maybe this time it wants company that remembers how to leave a mark. So if you ever see lights above the corn, cold, white, breathing, don't count them. Don't follow, because the moment they notice you watching, they start counting you back. I used to talk to the corn when I was a kid. It sounds crazy now, but when you grow up in the middle of nowhere, silence becomes something you have to fill, or it starts filling you. My dad's farm sat on the last stretch of Claymore Road. No neighbors within shouting distance, just endless rows of corn that turned gold in September and gray by November. He said corn has memory now that it listens to seasons. When I asked what that meant, he said, every harvest, it remembers who cut it down. I thought it was just one of those farmer sayings meant to keep me working. Until last summer, I came back after 10 years away after Dad passed. The house looked smaller, but the field looked bigger. The stalks were taller than ever, brushing against the power lines in places. I stayed a few nights to pack things up, planning to sell the land. But on the second night, something strange happened. While sorting through Dad's old notebooks, I heard a faint rustle from outside. Not wind, not animals. It sounded like whispering, soft, rhythmic, too patterned to be random. I stepped onto the porch and the air hit me, warm and heavy like someone exhaling right against my face. The whole field moved in slow, synchronized waves, and I swear I heard my own voice in it. Low, drawn out like a word half remembered, I said, "Hello?" And the field answered. It wasn't words, more like the breath of 1,000 throats at once, shaping something close to speech but never getting there. It carried my hello back at me. The same length, same tone, just softer. I stood frozen until the whispering died down. Then silence again, the kind that feels like it's listening. Inside, I told myself it was wind, except the windows weren't rattling. The air outside wasn't moving anymore. Only the corn had. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that soft exhale. My own voice repeating, fading, returning again like tide. Morning didn't help. When I went out to check the field, I found something that made no sense. Between 2 rows near the edge, the soil was disturbed, as if something had pushed up from underneath. Not dug, pushed. The stalks around that patch were bent outward, all facing away from a small circle of earth, dark and wet. And right in the center of it was one ear of corn, still attached to a root, but split open, kernels black and hollow like burned pearls. Dad's old notebook on the porch rail caught the wind and flipped open. The page it landed on had just 4 words written in his shaky hand. Don't whisper to it. The notebook stayed open on that line all morning, no matter how many times I shut it. I told myself it was coincidence, the breeze, muscle memory, and the spine of an old book. But the handwriting didn't feel like my father's. Too deliberate, too alive for a hand gone 2 years. By afternoon, the sky turned milk gray, the color it gets before a storm that never arrives. The air felt thick again. You could taste dirt in it. I kept hearing a low shiver from the rows, short bursts like breath caught between teeth. The sound came and went, always from a different direction. Around 6, I poured myself a drink, sat on the porch, and tried to talk sense into the quiet. "Wind moves," I said out loud. "Wind doesn't remember." It felt good to say something certain. The field answered anyway. A single row rippled from west to east, one smooth motion like a body turning over in sleep. Then nothing. I went down the steps, glass still in my hand. When I reached the edge of the rows, the smell hit me. Not rot, not growth, breath. Warm human breath. The kind that carries words it hasn't decided to speak. I stepped between the stalks. The world changed texture. Every sound outside the corn, crickets, the hum of power lines, the faint rumble of highway miles off, vanished. Only the soft rustle remained, and it was steady now, almost rhythmic, like lungs working in soil. I whispered, "Dad?" The field exhaled that same single word back, warped as if filtered through cloth. It didn't mimic my tone. It copied his. The exact way he used to answer from another room when I called for him. I dropped the glass. It didn't shatter. It just sank into the dirt. I turned toward the house. The porch light flickered once and the air pulled inward. A slow inhale through 1,000 stalks. The rows around me leaned closer, not bending, breathing. Each ear of corn swelled slightly, silk trembling, as though lungs had grown beneath the husks. "Stop," I whispered. The field obeyed. Total stillness. Then a voice from directly behind me, soft and close enough to move the hair on my neck. "I missed you, son." I spun. Nothing but corn, no figure, no space big enough for one. The words had come from the stalk nearest my ear. Its leaves were damp. They glistened like skin. I backed out of the rows, stumbling onto the open dirt. The whispering returned, lower now, woven with the rhythm of the earth. Every few seconds I heard fragments, bits of sentences my father used to say when I was a kid, spoken by a mouth that didn't know where to place the pauses. "Keep the rows straight. Rain's coming. Don't whisper to it." That last one made the others stop. Silence again, heavy and aware. I went inside, locked both doors, and turned the radio on just to fill the air. Static came first, then an old country station. The singer's voice dragged like a warped tape. Halfway through the song, he stopped singing and said, clear as daylight, "You shouldn't have answered." Then the station cut back to music like nothing happened. I didn't sleep. At 3 a.m. the house sighed, wood shifting the way it does when temperature drops, except the air hadn't changed. Something brushed the siding outside. A slow scrape that moved from one window to the next. Not footsteps, more like breathing against walls, trying to find a way in. When dawn came, I walked the property again because that's what fear makes you do. It begs for proof. In the soft morning light, I saw it. Every window on the lower floor fogged from outside, each pane bearing a faint imprint the size of a human mouth pressed against glass. And in the dirt below the kitchen window, the same patch I'd seen disturbed before had grown larger, the soil mounded up like something underneath had inhaled during the night. The roots nearby were split, stretched upward. At the center of that patch, a single ear of corn lay on its side, still green. Its husk rose and fell slowly, as if sleeping. I backed away, heart trying to find a rhythm the world would accept. Behind me, the field whispered again. One long, drawn-out breath that sounded too much like my name. Eli. That was the moment I realized the corn wasn't echoing me. It wasn't copying at all. It was remembering. By the third night, the air itself felt alive. Even the insects had gone silent, as if the world was holding its lungs full. I stayed inside, curtains drawn, but silence makes you brave in the wrong ways. At 11:47 p.m., the whispering began again. Not outside, under the floorboards. Soft, pulsing, like someone breathing against the underside of the house. Every exhale pushed dust from the cracks between planks. Each inhale made the windows tremble. I crept to the porch, flashlight in hand. The beam barely reached the edge of the field. The mist had thickened, pale and low, hovering like it was waiting for permission to rise. Somewhere deep in the rows, a voice said, "Eli, you left me." My father's voice. The exact tone from the last night I saw him alive. The guilt I'd carried for a decade crawled out of my chest and stood next to me. I whispered back. Not words, just sound. "And the field," answered all at once, every stalk bent toward me. Hundreds, maybe thousands. The sound of leaves brushing each other became one enormous sigh, like an ocean made of breath. My flashlight flickered and died. The darkness didn't feel empty anymore. It pressed back. "I remember," the voice said again, louder now, coming from everywhere. The soil at the base of the porch steps started to bulge. I watched, frozen, as clumps of earth lifted and split. Roots thick as wrists writhed out of the ground and tangled together, not growing, reaching. They coiled around something small and pale that pushed up through the dirt, a jawbone still attached to a strip of gray cloth. I fell backward, scraping my palms, realizing what I was looking at. Dad hadn't been buried in town like I'd been told. The field had kept him. The corn around the mound began to move like lungs again. Each row inhaled and exhaled, synchronized, drawing air through a body that stretched across acres. The whisper rose higher, faster, until words formed from the noise. "You cut us. We grew back. We remembered you." Every voice sounded like his, like mine, like everyone who'd ever worked this land. The mound split open completely. From the soil, half-rotted stalks clawed upward, their tips splitting like fingers. Each husk that opened revealed not kernels but teeth. Tiny, white human teeth set in yellow flesh. They chattered in rhythm, imitating breath. I stumbled toward the truck, fumbling with the keys. Behind me, the field moved as one. 1,000 rows inhaling sharply, then exhaling my name. The sound knocked the air out of my lungs. When I looked back, the first few rows had leaned far enough that the tops of the stalks brushed the dirt. Like a bow, the entire field was bowing to me. And in that moment, I understood. It wasn't trying to harm me. It was welcoming me, because the corn didn't just breathe. It needed lungs. It needed a voice to remember with. The engine sputtered once, then died. The key twisted uselessly. The whispering grew louder, closer, now coming from inside the cab. Condensation bloomed across the windshield from the inside out, and through it a single line appeared in the fog, drawn by something invisible. "Don't whisper to it." Then a second line. Shakier, too late. The glass caved inward. Not shattered, inhaled. Air rushed out of my lungs like it was being stolen. The world went white. When I woke, it was morning. The truck sat in the driveway, door open. The field stood still, golden and calm. Birds sang again. I walked to the porch in disbelief. The notebook lay open where I'd left it, but the words had changed. Now the handwriting looked exactly like mine. It said, "Every harvest remembers its last breath." I looked up. The wind moved through the stalks, gentle this time, like someone breathing with me. For a moment I thought I heard a heartbeat beneath the rustle. It matched mine. When I turned to go inside, I saw something that made me stop. Near the porch steps, a new stalk had sprouted overnight. Tall, green, impossibly fresh. From its husk, a faint exhale escaped. Warm, steady, human. I knelt down, whispered one word. "Dad." The stalk swayed once slowly, then breathed the word "son" back. Every small town has that one attraction it clings to like a superstition. For Willow County, it's Carter's Harvest Maze. Every October, they cut the corn into winding trails, hang strings of orange bulbs, and charge $10 for people to get lost and laugh about it. I worked there 2 seasons in college. It was harmless, families, cider, hay rides, the usual Midwest charm wrapped in bug spray. But last year, after the final weekend, we tore the maze down. I remember burning the leftover stalks myself. By November, the field was flat, bare, ready for winter. So tell me why this August. I drove past that same stretch of road and saw the entrance gate standing again. The same rotted archway. The same hand-painted sign that said, "Enter if you dare." No one had permission to rebuild it. Carter's farm closed for good after his accident. His combine rolled halfway through harvest, crushed him where the rows narrowed. The county auctioned the land and the new owner planted soybeans. But what I saw wasn't soy. It was corn. Tall, gold-green, perfect. I pulled over because disbelief has a gravity. Up close, the arch looked older, as if a whole decade had passed since last fall. The bulbs were dead, but the wires hummed faintly, like they still remembered electricity. A breeze came from inside the rows. Not across the field, from within it, a steady current pushing outward, warm and rhythmic like breath through teeth. I stepped closer. The soil under the arch was freshly tamped, no weeds, no tracks, just one neat path leading inward, cut sharp as if by mower blades. 10 steps in, the air changed temperature, cooler, sweeter. The smell of rot vanished. The world behind me grew muffled, as though someone had placed a jar over sound. I took out my phone to film. The screen lit, then froze. Time, battery, everything locked at 9:47 p.m. Even though it was daylight, the path forked ahead exactly where I remembered building the first turn years ago. Same layout, same rows. But that was impossible. We'd burned this maze to ash. I called out, "Hello?" Because empty spaces deserve witnesses. No echo, just the faint shuffle of leaves rearranging themselves after my words left. When I turned to leave, the entrance wasn't there anymore. Behind me, only another corridor, narrower. The corn pressed close enough that the husks brushed my shoulders. A trick of direction, I thought. A wrong turn, easy in a maze. Except there was no wind and the stalks were closing. I pushed through until the light dimmed to amber. Somewhere ahead, a bulb glowed, one of the string lights flickering like it was struggling to remember its job. I followed it because fear and curiosity run on the same wire. The cord hung from nowhere, vanishing into sky. Under it stood a single scarecrow, one I recognized immediately. The flannel shirt with the missing sleeve, the burlap face with a black X where a mouth should be. We'd built it my first season. It should have burned with the rest. The head turned when I exhaled. Not fast, not jerky, slow, like an afterthought catching up. The X flexed once, as if tasting air through fabric. Then faintly, from somewhere deep in the rows behind it, a voice said, "You never clocked out." I froze. That was Carter's voice, raspy, low, the way it sounded the day before the accident when he'd told me to double knot the arch ropes. The scarecrow's hand lifted, straw fingers curling toward the maze's heart. The light above it steadied, bright white now, no flicker. My phone buzzed in my pocket, screen still frozen at 9:47 p.m., but a new notification blinked over it. Shift in progress, do not leave maze. And beneath it, smaller text I didn't add. Estimated time remaining. I told myself it was a prank. Some leftover Halloween setup or TikTok ghost hunters with too much time. But that didn't explain the smell. The air inside the maze had that deep, sweet rot of silage, the kind that clings to your tongue. It didn't belong in August. I turned to retrace my steps, but every corridor behind me looked the same. Symmetrical, exact. The footprints I'd made in the dust were gone. Only smooth soil, unbroken. I looked up. The sky had changed too. It wasn't blue anymore, just a flat, dim bronze like light shining through old honey. My phone buzzed again. Still frozen at 9:47 p.m. But the notification changed. Supervisor. Message. Continue to Section C. Guests waiting. I swiped at it. The screen stayed black except for those words, glowing faintly like they were printed behind the glass. Guests, I whispered, half laughing. That was the term we used back when I worked here. Carter always said never to call them customers. Guests sounded like something that came to visit, not something that paid to leave. I walked on, thinking maybe if I followed the paths long enough I'd hit an outer fence. But the air kept thickening and the corn grew closer until I could feel the silk brushing my neck like fingertips. Every few yards another string light flickered above, hanging from wires that had no poles. Then the speakers came on. We used to pipe in sound effects at night. Fake laughter, screams, crows. But this sound wasn't ours. It was a slow dragging noise, wet and steady like burlap being pulled through mud. Between drags I heard breathing. Not human, slower, deeper, like soil sighing. I called out again, louder this time. "Who's here?" Something whispered back from the next corridor. "Staff entrance only." I stepped forward and the air went cold. Not temperature cold. The kind of cold you feel behind your ribs when the room gets smaller. The path curved left. At the bend stood an old turnstile gate, half rusted, spinning slightly on its own. The sign above it read "Employees Only," and beneath that, someone had carved 3 letters with something sharp, END. When I tried to step back, the ground shifted under me. The dirt rippled, soft like wet fabric, and the stalks leaned inward, closing around my legs. The sound of breathing returned, but closer, right beside my ear. "Clock in," it said. Carter's voice again, just above a whisper. "Clock in before they notice." My hand went to my pocket out of instinct. Inside was the old punch card I'd kept as a keepsake, the one with my name burned into the edge. I never carried it, but there it was, edges soft, the time slots empty except the last line stamped in fresh red ink. In, 9:47 p.m. No out. I backed away from the turnstile, breathing shallow. The corn rustled behind me. The whisper changed tone, almost amused. "You can't leave half shift." I bolted, sprinting down the nearest corridor. The lights above flickered faster, then steadied into a long white glow that stretched endlessly forward. The walls of corn straightened, too neat, too uniform. Every 20 feet another scarecrow. Dozens of them, one in every junction. Each one dressed differently, each one wearing the faces of the people I'd worked with. Carter in his denim cap, Jenna with her fake vampire cape, Mike who fell off the hayride truck. Their burlap mouths stitched shut with wire. As I passed, they turned their heads to follow me, slowly all at once, synchronized like dancers waiting for a cue. At the center of the maze, the path opened into a clearing. I recognized it. That's where we used to build the bonfire for closing night. Except this time the pit was already lit. The flames burned low and blue, throwing no heat. In front of it stood a time clock, metal, green, old-fashioned like the one from the employee shed. The punch slot glowed red. A voice drifted up from the fire. "Shift complete." I froze. The phone buzzed again, the same frozen screen flashing once more. "Clock out to exit." My pulse thudded in my ears. I stepped toward the clock. The metal was cold enough to burn. As I raised my card to the slot, I saw the reflection in its glass face, me standing behind myself. Expression wrong. Smiling. My reflection reached forward first, pressed the card in, and the machine screamed, a shrill, mechanical sound that echoed through the maze like a siren. The corn responded immediately. Every stalk turned toward me. Leaves rattled in perfect rhythm, whispering one word over and over, faster, louder. "Stay, stay, stay." I dropped the card and ran. The ground beneath me pulsed like a heartbeat. Every turn led back to the same clearing. Every direction looked familiar, wrong, endless. Behind me, the scarecrows had left their posts. They were walking, not stiff, not clumsy, not deliberate, patient, like people returning to work after a long break. I could hear Carter's voice above them all, clearer now, coming from everywhere at once. "We close when the maze forgets the way out." I stumbled backward into a wall of corn that wasn't there before. Something caught my shoulder, straw hands, cold and firm, and a voice at my ear said, "You're late." Then everything went black. When I came to, the night was quieter than death. The air didn't move, the fire pit was gone, and I was lying in the dirt with the time card clutched in my hand. The stamp on it had changed. It now read, out, 9:47 p.m., same minute, same second, no date. My throat was raw from shouting, but the maze hadn't answered back this time. Only the sound of my own breathing echoed, swallowed by the stillness of the rows. When I stood, I saw something different. Faint white arrows painted on the ground pointing toward a corridor I didn't remember building. They looked fresh, wet even. The soil shimmered like it had been brushed by rain, though the sky above was starless and dry. I followed the arrows because they were the only direction that felt decided. Every few steps, I passed another one of those old string lights, glowing a sickly orange now instead of white. They led me toward a new gate. It looked identical to the entrance, only same rotted arch, same painted letters, but the sign no longer said "Enter if you dare." Now it read, "Thank you for working the harvest," and beneath it, in smaller hand-painted letters, "See you next season." The sight of it nearly broke me, because that phrase, that exact phrase, used to be on the posters we'd hang after closing weekend. I remember painting the original one myself. Carter had stood right next to me laughing, saying, "Nothing ever really closes around here, kid." I stepped through the gate. For a second, I thought I'd escaped. The cool night air hit me. The highway was visible in the distance, a faint silver ribbon under the moonlight. But as I walked, something felt wrong. My footsteps didn't sound like gravel anymore. They sounded hollow, like stepping across the floor of a barn. I looked down. The ground beneath my boots wasn't road, it was wooden boards, stained dark. Rows of hay bales lined both sides, the smell of old gasoline thick in the air. At the far end, the shadows twisted and rearranged themselves into the silhouette of a man standing behind a tall machine. The combine. Carter. His outline shimmered against the light of a single hanging bulb. He was smiling, or at least the shape of a smile moved across what used to be his face. "Took you long enough," he said, his voice low, steady, the way he sounded when something finally went right. We were short-staffed. I stumbled back. The air behind me thickened again, that warm current I'd felt the first day. The gate had vanished. Only rows of corn in every direction, circling the barn like walls that hadn't been built yet. Carter stepped closer. The sound his boots made didn't match the ground. Too soft, too slow, like straw rubbing together. He stopped an arm's length away, studying me with eyes that looked filled, not hollow, filled with light the color of static. "The maze remembers its builders," he said. "We keep it running. Someone has to guide the guests." He lifted his hand, straw and bone threaded together like roots. The palm opened, revealing a brass punch-card clock, small, glowing faintly. "Clock in," he whispered. I shook my head, but my hand moved anyway, the time card sliding between my fingers like it belonged there. I pressed it into the slot. The machine clicked once. Then the corn outside began to move again. Rows shifting, bending, reforming themselves into fresh corridors. The floorboards beneath us vibrated. The lights hanging above flickered alive one by one, stretching far into the dark until they curved out of sight. Carter turned toward the sound and smiled wider. "Opening night," he said. "They'll be coming soon." He looked back at me, eyes burning faint white now. "We'll need more hands this year." The walls of corn pressed in closer, whispering, the sound of 1,000 dry leaves breathing at once. I dropped the card, ran past him straight through the rows, and didn't stop until the air grew thin and the horizon split with dawn. When I reached the highway, the world looked normal again. Cars passed. The sky was blue. But when I turned to look back, the field was gone. No corn, no gate, no sign. Just an empty stretch of soil, tilled and bare. I drove until I saw the water tower, until I felt human again. But later that day, when I stopped for gas, the cashier asked if I was working at Carter's Maze this year. He said the posters had gone up again that morning. Early promotion. He even had a flyer by the register. It was new, glossy, printed with this year's date. At the bottom, I saw a familiar photo of staff members lined up in front of the gate. Carter, Jenna, Mike. And there, near the end of the row, me, eyes half closed. Smile slightly wrong. A tag beneath the picture read, "Now hiring for night shifts. 9:47 p.m. start." The cashier grinned. "You should go back," he said. "They always remember their best workers." That night, when I checked my phone, the lock screen glowed in the dark. Battery 100%, time 9:47 p.m., and a new calendar alert blinking quietly. Shift in progress. I turned the phone off. It stayed on. Outside my window, the faint hum of string lights started up again. A low electric buzz fading into the sound of corn brushing itself awake. And somewhere out there, in a field that burned to ash years ago, the maize took its first breath of the season. When you grow up around farm machinery, you learn to tell engines apart by sound. A John Deere sings, a Case growls, and the old Alice Chalmers combine we had when I was a kid, it breathed not loudly, not like a motor struggling, more like a steady human exhale through metal lungs. That sound used to lull me to sleep when Dad worked night harvests. He'd leave it idling at the edge of the field. Red paint dulled to rust, yellow lights casting halos through the dust. Sometimes, if you stood near the cab at midnight, you could swear the machine was sighing. Tired but patient. After Dad died, the combine sat for almost 15 years. Same spot. East edge of the property, parked beside the old water tower. We never sold it, never moved it. The keys hung in the shed, tied to a piece of twine. 2 months ago, when I came back to clean out the farm, it was still there, unmoved. Except the twine was gone. The keys sat in the ignition. I remember stopping halfway across the yard, the air already thick with humidity, the sound of insects electric. And then I heard it. That breathing, long, slow, measured, the same rhythm I'd fallen asleep to as a boy, only this time no one was in the cab. I walked closer, expecting to find a stray cat or raccoon trapped inside, but the sound didn't come from the engine bay. It came from the grain chute, the long, rusted pipe that used to spit out corn like sand through a throat. Every few seconds it released a soft puff of air, almost like something inside was testing the exhale. The ignition key was turned halfway forward, not enough to start the motor, just enough to make the panel lights glow a faint red. I reached up, switched it off. The breathing stopped instantly. I waited. Nothing. No click, no shift of metal cooling. Just silence and the faint smell of burned oil. That should have been the end of it. But when I turned to walk back to the house, the combine made a noise I'll never forget. A low cough, followed by the slow churn of gears turning themselves. The lights flickered on. Not bright, just enough to outline the cab in red. It hadn't moved an inch in 15 years. The tires were half buried in earth. Still, I swear the front end rose a little, like a chest taking breath after drowning. I told myself it was residual pressure in the lines, metal settling, whatever explanation keeps you sane. But when I came out the next morning, the ground told the truth. Fresh tracks. Heavy. Leading 5 feet forward into the corn. I checked the gas tank, and still empty. The key still turned off. And on the dash, in the thin layer of dust, a single line had been drawn through with a finger. 4 words carved deep enough to show the metal underneath. You left it running. That night the sound started again. I heard it through my bedroom window. That slow mechanical exhale. Long in, long out, like something was remembering lungs. I went out with a flashlight. The air was still. Every insect had gone quiet. The combine's lights weren't on, but I could see something glowing faintly through the slats of the engine grill. A dull orange pulse, like a pilot light inside a sleeping beast. The chute released another puff of air, timed perfectly with the rhythm of my own breathing. When I held my breath, it stopped. When I exhaled, it started again, like it was listening, like it was waiting. The next few nights I kept the window shut. Didn't matter. The sound came through the walls anyway. That deep rhythmic exhale, the combine's breathing, became part of the house. It seeped through pipes, floorboards, even the quiet. You can't muffle something that isn't really sound. On the fourth night, I gave in and went outside. Moonless sky, humid enough to make the air feel liquid. The field shimmered like it was sweating. I didn't take the flashlight this time. I didn't want to see, just to listen. And that's when I noticed the rhythm had changed. It wasn't random breathing anymore. It was counting. 3 short exhales. 1 long. Pause. Repeat. I stood by the porch mouthing the pattern until I recognized it. It was the signal Dad used to give when he wanted me to stop the tractor. 3 horn taps, 1 long. The same pattern he'd used to call me in for dinner when we worked different ends of the field. That's when I realized it wasn't breathing. It was calling. I grabbed the flashlight and went anyway because I'm not built to let a question stay unanswered. The beam carved a thin tunnel through the corn. Halfway to the east edge where the combine had always sat, the stalks were flattened in wide arcs. Fresh, like something huge had passed through just hours ago. The machine was gone from its resting place. Only an oil-dark imprint remained where it had sunk into the soil for 15 years. Tracks led deeper into the field. Heavy, clean, perfectly straight. No drag, no skids. It hadn't been pushed. It had driven. I followed the trail with my light bouncing off the walls of corn until I found it. There at the heart of the field, the combine idled. Headlights dead, cab empty. Its metal sides gleamed with sweat. Not oil, not dew, but condensation. As if it were alive and cooling down from exertion. Steam hissed softly from the exhaust, glowing orange from the inside like a slow fire under iron skin. The grain chute expanded and contracted, keeping time with that impossible breath. I climbed up onto the ladder, against every instinct in my body. The cab smelled like diesel and dirt and something faintly sweet, like breath on a fever. The seat was warm, and on the dashboard someone had left a Polaroid. It was me, age 6, sitting on Dad's lap in that same seat. He had one hand on the steering wheel, the other on mine. The date in the corner was written in pen, 9/14/04, the exact day he died under that same machine. I looked down at the floor mat. There was a boot print in the dust, fresh, size 12, same as his, and the heel was smeared with red soil, the kind from the edge of the creek half a mile away. I backed down the ladder, every rung a prayer. When my boots hit the ground, the combine shifted, a slow hydraulic sigh. The front blades tilted downward like a head lowering. The lights blinked once, weak orange, and the radio inside the cab crackled. "Don't leave it running." Dad's voice. Not a recording. Not static, the same rasp I heard the morning the ambulance came. The engine roared to life. Not a startup, a heartbeat. The blades began to turn just enough to catch the light spinning slow and patient. The air vibrated with the low hum of machinery remembering what it's for. I stumbled backward, tripping over stalks. The combine inched forward. No one in the seat, no driver. But the steering wheel turned slightly, correcting itself like it remembered the terrain. It moved exactly like Dad used to, slow, deliberate, as if testing the soil before cutting. When I ran, it didn't chase. It just pivoted, watching me with its headlights. 2 dim suns. Then the engine settled into idle again, purring like it was satisfied. From the porch, I could still see those lights through the corn. They stayed on all night, faint orange glows hovering above the stalks. The next morning, they were gone, but fresh tracks led straight to the barn, right up to the doors. And painted across one door, written in something that looked like oil but smelled like breath, were the words, "You left me out here." The next morning, the air felt wrong. Not heavy, just thicker, like the space between things had been filled with something invisible. Even the birds refused to cross the eastern sky. I didn't eat, didn't sleep, just sat on the porch and stared at the barn. The combine tracks ended right at its doors, neat as handwriting. The words still glistened there. "You left me out here." The paint wasn't paint. It was oil mixed with something dark and sticky, like sap that had learned to bleed. By noon, the sun hid behind clouds, turning everything the color of old paper. I decided to open the barn, not to prove anything, just to end the waiting. Because waiting is its own kind of possession. The first hinge screamed when I touched it. Inside, the light was pale and dusty, but I could still see the space where Dad's tools used to hang, an outline of ghosts on the wall. The air smelled like rust and ozone, and underneath, that same low, steady breathing. Inhale, exhale. The barn itself seemed to move with it. The combine was inside. I froze. Last night it had been in the field. Now it sat parked neatly in the center of the barn, its red shell dark with condensation. The keys hung from the ignition, swinging gently even though there was no breeze. The ground beneath it was soaked with oil and water, a dark mirror rippling with every exhale. I stepped closer. The headlights flickered once, weak like eyes fluttering in a dream. Each blink synced perfectly with my heartbeat. I whispered, "Dad?" just to see if it would answer. The cab light came on. Inside, the driver's seat wasn't empty anymore. Something sat there upright still. The shape was human but not solid, built from smoke and dust and a thin shimmer of heat, the same kind that rises off asphalt. The longer I looked, the more the shape took form. The same shoulders, the same cap tilted forward. "Dad." I knew I should have run, but grief is a tether. It pulls you toward what you've already lost. "Why are you here?" I asked. The radio clicked on, dial twisting itself until the static formed a voice. "You left the harvest half done." His voice aged but calm, every syllable wrapped in the soft hiss of machinery. "It's over," I said. "You're gone." "Not while the field still breathes," he answered. The combine shuddered, metal flexing like ribs filling with air. It remembers who cut it first. The barn doors slammed shut behind me. The lights went black except for the orange glow seeping through the vents. The floor started trembling, boards creaking in rhythm with the machine's breathing. Dust fell from the rafters like ash. I reached for the ignition. If I could turn it off, maybe everything would stop. But the key turned on its own. The engine came alive, low rumble growing into a guttural roar. The entire combine shook as gears engaged, blades spinning slow at first, then faster. The radio screamed with feedback, then his voice cut through again. Almost gentle. "You left me out there in the dark, waiting to finish what we started." I backed away, but the floor felt soft underfoot, like standing on a chest full of lungs. The walls expanded and contracted, wooden slats flexing with each breath. Every nail groaned in protest. Outside, I could hear the corn responding, rustling in long waves like applause. The machine's headlights flared white-hot, flooding the barn with light. The figure in the cab moved, slowly turning its head toward me. The cap fell away. There was no face, just a hollow of whirling air, a tunnel of orange light that exhaled heat against my skin. "Dad, please," I whispered. "Stop!" "You left me running." The blades screamed. The ground tilted. I fell backward as oil poured from the vents, slick and warm, crawling across the floor toward me like liquid shadow. The smell was the same as that night long ago, the night they pulled his body out from under this machine. It wrapped around my legs, pulling me toward the front intake. The air pressure dropped. I couldn't breathe. The combine inhaled. Just before it reached me, I did something stupid. I exhaled back. Hard. A full breath, forced out like defiance. The machine stuttered, gears grinding, engine choking. I screamed again, every ounce of air in my lungs pushing against its rhythm. And then, silence. The lights dimmed. The blades slowed. The cab emptied. The shape was gone, the barn filled with dust. When it cleared, the combine was dark again. Still. Dead. The keys hung loose. I crawled outside, gasping. The sun had come out pale and thin. The air smelled clean again. For the first time in years, the cornfield was silent. I left the farm that afternoon. Never came back. Sold the land. Moved 3 states away, but last week I got a letter. No return address, just a Polaroid tucked inside. It showed the east edge of the old field, and there, parked exactly where it always sat, was the combine, paint bright red, brand new, clean as if it had never rusted at all. On the back of the photo, written in oil dark ink, were 4 words: "You forgot to exhale." Now, at night I hear it again through the walls. That same steady breath. Inhale. Exhale. Somewhere far off, an engine waiting for someone to breathe with it. I don't look outside anymore, because I know it's patient, and I know sooner or later, every sun forgets to turn something off.